It's the 200 Cops, folks, back again. And hey, Schultzy,
Yep.
happy birthday for yesterday, mate.
Thanks, mate. Yeah,
The big, the big 4-7.
yeah, I know. Yeah, mate. I still, I actually don't feel like 21 anymore. But mind you, I wish I was 21 with the amount of knowledge I've got.
Well, you look about 27. So I won't give you 21. Actually, yeah 27 in need of an eye test, but that's okay. All good. Yeah,
Yeah. And mate,
yeah.
graying early.
Oh, it's okay. Oh, great. You've been graying for days, my friend, but that's okay. But hey, mate, what's been happening? What are we up to today?
Well, mate, we've got a guy, Mark contacted us, and through YouTube actually. We get quite a few hits on YouTube, which is pretty good. And he's asked a question. He said, "Do you find that police or anyone working in combat agencies, first responders, find it difficult to talk or relate to others outside of work?"
Oh,
So
what a topic!
I
What a
know
topic!
that's actually one you and I have spoken about often.
Yeah,
How
mate,
you
and
relate to
yeah,
people outside of work. So
yeah. So, mate, it's also a very important one because you have to relate to people outside of work.
yep,
Your friends and family are not necessarily all going to be police, fire, emergency services, bloody prison guards, whatever else, and they won't be working in the types of in anything like what you're working in.
no,
Um,
that's right.
So, mate, do you want to kick it off? What are your thoughts there? Because I mean, I've always got plenty to say, but I'm sure you do too. Yeah,
Well,
kick us off, Schultzy. What do you
it's
reckon?
mate, look, it's something I've always found difficult. And I think part of the reason I've mentioned it before, but you, I hate, um, we've seen a lot of shit. Anybody that's been in first responders has seen a lot of shit. And I see happy people and I don't want to load them up with the amount of shit we've seen, if you know what I mean.
Oh
If
yeah,
we, if yeah, I mean, if we go back and look, we'll talk about our worst jobs. That was difficult for us to talk about, and you and I actually spoke. The week leading up to releasing that, just discussing whether we should release it or not, because it's just stuff you try and hold back from the public. Because I think, we've spent a long time talking about some of the shit we've seen, like between us and with other mates, and what they've seen as well. And I don't know, you don't want to put other people through the trauma, and I think that makes it hard to actually talk to people outside that don't really understand. You don't want to burden them with, I suppose, some of the truth. Maybe it's a bit like parents, how they try and shield their kids, from the world, just to keep them safe. But yeah, mate, it's a difficult one, and it's something I remember you and I spoke when you first left the police, and you were telling me that you find it difficult to actually communicate to people that haven't been in the job, and I think, well, I'm the same. And look, for anybody out there, if you feel that way as well, and I guarantee there would be a lot, or if not all, just send us something in how you've handled it, or how you get around it. So yeah, I mean, what do you think, mate?
so yeah, one of the I reckon there's two components to this. The first one you've just covered, which is we've got you protect without sounding like a dickhead. You do get a very strong sense of a requirement to protect innocence. I've spoken about before. I worked as a when I first got out of the job, bit of bloody charity for the local school pretty well. I was the GA, so I mowed lawns at the local little tiny school that my kids go to.
Yeah,
And I felt extremely protective of that little tiny group of kids. There's only about 12 kids at the school, but they're so innocent. They're so young, so innocent. They're living in such a first world place. It's like I just really did not want them to suffer any kind of problem. I just wanted everything to be good, which is probably not great because it's kind of without cotton wooling people. Like you let them have a
yeah,
run around and all the rest, but I just really wanted to protect the innocence. So I can completely understand that. But I find that's more towards kids. I don't like my kids are always, oh, daddy, what did you see in the police? All this sort of stuff. It's like, And I just tell them, oh, we dealt with bad guys and we helped a lot of people. And you'd never go into detail, but my kids are quite young.
Yeah.
But the second one is when dealing with adults, so peers, um, y- the, there's a complete, and it's not nothing, it's not detracting from these people. These are highly intelligent, very good in their field people, but they can't possibly comprehend what you're talking about.
No,
So
no, that's
what
right.
happens is sometimes people, and a lot of the time people are interested. And the other trouble I have and you have is that we're bloody extroverts, mate. We're talkers.
Yeah, that's right.
So, there's a lot of coppers who aren't talkers. There's a lot of introverted police, and they don't say a lot when they're outside. And that probably is a good thing, and people don't really probe them. But when you're having a yarn anyway, people ask you questions, and I'm pretty honest. I just sort of tell them, but I'm wary of my audience. But I'll share information, and sometimes they'll push a bit, and then you watch their eyes glaze over. I think I've mentioned it before,
Yeah,
where they just can't comprehend what you're talking about. If we're talking about critical stuff like high level uses of force, or um, you know, what we've talked about in the bad jobs of really bad car crashes and dead bodies and stuff like that. Well, they
yeah,
can't possibly comprehend that. The only dead body a lot of people have seen is if an elderly family member may have passed away at home, or something, or the very odd person has been through a traumatic incident where they saw a dead body, but that's the biggest, most traumatic thing they've ever seen in their life. And I guarantee you that was just a job that the cops turned up to and then went to lunch. Like it would have been nothing to the police who responded. So, and that's not detracting from that person's experience. It's just that the police do it all the time. So
yeah,
um, it's very, very difficult to relate. And I found it tricky when I first got down here because I'm in a rural area, and a lot of people they talk about cattle. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy eating cattle. I'm trying to learn how to cut up cattle. Like that's I'm great. I love the fact of where I live, but I don't have a lot in common with them, and they don't have a lot in common with me.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong, we're all to get along. We're good mate. I've got a good crew of mates here, but yeah, I find that it's extremely difficult to really get into it. And mate, it almost harks back to the days of World War One when and oh geez, I'm not comparing myself to the bloody Gallipoli diggers, but what I'm
mm,
saying is that the exact same feeling is what the RSL was formed out of. It was
yeah,
that requirement. They've been out in the normal world where people are very normal and they're not normal, and they need to be around people who've experienced similar things. And I'm not I mean, obviously, we're on a much lower scale. I'm not comparing myself to the guys from the trenches of World War One, but that's the same mentality. It's you
yeah.
need to be around the people who have experienced it. And I know I'm ranting again,
Well,
but I'll hand over in a sec. I'll give you the example. I went on a Bali trip with a bunch of mates from Darwin Station, and
yeah,
I'd been out of the police maybe 12 months, and I hadn't really been around policemen except you. Like I'd hung out with you, and we'd had beers and all the rest of it, but I hadn't been around a group of police in a social setting for a very long time. And I remember we were sitting at a swim up bar in bloody Nusa Dua, and I just remember going, I'm with my people. Like I remember thinking I've got a shitload in common with these people, and I feel very, very at home.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So anyway, that's my thoughts, mate. What are your thoughts
Uh,
there?
Well, yeah, mate. You just reminded me, and we've spoken about this before when we are on that Bucks do in Sydney, and that guy that he was ex Vietnam vet. And it was funny because all his friends, well, it's not funny, but all his friends that had known him for many, 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 many years, he'd never spoken about it, but they knew he was a Vietnam vet, but he just never spoke about it. And we were the only ones he ever opened up to. And I think it was good for him to talk, but I think that it kind of that, I suppose, emphasizes what we're talking about here, because he'd only just met us that day, and to open up about some of the shit that he saw, when he's been friends with these other people for decades, and hadn't mentioned it.
No,
And I think that's probably a good way to emphasize what we're actually trying to put out there. I know there's also other stories. I had a nurse friend of mine, and her friend actually had a husband that was in the cops, and I think he was involved in the Link Cafe, store.
Yeah. Yep.
And anyway, his wife was, upset because he wouldn't talk to her. And, my friend's asking me, and I said, look, he probably won't. I said, but that's not such a bad thing. I said, you got to have good communication between your wife and or your husband if you're a female cop and all that sort of stuff. But you've also got to understand there's just some things that they don't like to talk about, and know that as long as they're talking to other people, it's probably all right. It's something, sometimes it's just hard to share it with, I suppose, those you care about the most, or even, like you said, kids. And kids, and like what you actually mentioned there about, trying to protect the kids and all that sort of thing. I've got a story that, I go back to, and I've said it to some of my mates. And this woman came running into the Catherine police station one day, and she was carrying her. She had a baby, like, I don't know, close to a year old. Anyway, and she'd been beaten up by her husband, but she had, back. It was just on Acacia Drive she lived, so she'd just run up to the police station. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and anyway, we've gone, oh shit, and but their 3 year old was still in the house. So we jumped in the car and went down there, and basically the mother in law was at the house, and the kid was all right. This a gorgeous girl. She's 3 years old, still dressed up. Nothing had happened to her, but we had to arrest him. And of course, he kicked it on. He's calling us every name under the sun. Anyway, and I've like this little girl, and I've because I'm going to take her back to her mum who's waiting at the police station. She just looked up to me and reached up, put her hands up,
Yeah.
and I picked her up, and I just held her in my lap all the way as we drove to the police station with old mate in the cage, just carrying on, and gave it back to the mum. And that's a very personal thing for me. That was something that I'll remember till the day I die. Just the trust of that 3 year old girl, and just taking her out of that horrible situation. So
Yeah, mate. I think that would be an extremely universal thing amongst emergency services and military, especially people who have been deployed overseas and seen kids in horrendous situations. You just get so protective of the innocence. Like, it's this has to be preserved. This must be preserved. We know
yeah,
how bad things can be. Um, so I don't know. I probably engaged a bit more with the kids than a lot of the other dads. And don't get me wrong, the dads were very engaging. I mean, one of the other fellas coaches the soccer team. Like, they're very engaging. But I used to get amongst them, like really get in there and have a laugh with them, and as a result, I had a great little relationship with that little group, and they're a great little group of kids, and but they are so innocent. And
yeah,
I think that's the thing. I just get so protective. I feel like big mama bear.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's right,
but don't get me wrong,
exactly.
very ugly with a hairy chin, but don't fool mama bear. So
Yeah,
I
mate.
don't
I'm,
know.
I'm I'm glad your camera's off at the moment.
Yeah, okay, exactly right. Yeah. So mate, another point you made was um, about for God's sake, I can't remember his name, but the fellow was a Vietnam vet. So what
Me.
what I think he discovered immediately was um, a sense of understanding, and
Yep,
probably after a very long time of not having that sense of understanding. So I think that's the two or three components to what we're talking about is extreme protection of innocence, and for any and especially your experienced guys, like, and this could be, I reckon Ambos would really relate to this.
yep,
Fireys would relate to this, especially if fireys have been to bad fires where kids are scared, or been to car crashes where kids are scared, and then they see the fireman, like they're really, really, oh my God, there's the fireman. Like, they're everyone knows a fireman's safe.
yep,
So, and then the ambos. I mean, the ambos are going to um, potentially really bad injured kids. Like, that would be bad. Like, dealing with kids in just really bad medical situations, and also just injured or whatever else that we mightn't necessarily go to, where they're treating kids who are really in a lot of pain. That would really hurt my feelings, I reckon.
yeah. Oh,
So
yeah,
um, you get this incredible protection. You get this real sense of protectiveness that you must protect. Because I don't feel innocent myself. I don't feel innocent. I feel like my role in life is to protect them. I'm the one. If anyone's going to get hurt, it's going to be me. And I'm not trying to sound like a dick. I
no,
seriously don't. I'm not trying to say I'm a big brave man. I don't think I am. That's what I'm saying. But
Yep.
the other part of that is that you kind of want to relate this. I don't feel any better than anyone else, so I kind of relate my stories to other people, but they don't understand because they haven't done it, and
Yep.
that's not a detraction from them. They just haven't experienced that, and I'm sure that had they experienced it, they would be fine. They'd be, a lot of my friends would be very good in emergency services, but they just aren't there. And then the third one is the what was the last point you made? I've sorry, got on a rant and forgotten the
Oh,
last point.
geez, mate. Now you put me on the
Ah,
spot.
geez, we'll have to listen back. And anyway, it doesn't matter. There was a
Well,
third
mate,
point to
I'll,
it.
I'll, I'll I'll give you time to. You've just reminded me something there
Mm,
while you were talking. So while you remember, mate, so I've got it. One of my cousins, he's a volunteer fire, and this might relate to you like emergency services. So I can't remember the year, but it was a number of years ago. There was a really bad car crash out in the Darling Downs, like out near Kingaroy, and he was one of the ones that responded, and there was dead kids and all that sort of stuff there, and it really shook him. Like he's taken he's I mean he's still recovering now, and so this is also probably something you're probably because you spend quite a lot of time with volunteer people that go to this sort of stuff. So like we dealt with a lot of that, and I kind of reached out and tried to help him out as much as I could. But even he was trying to hold it in, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
Um, and I yeah, I like you, but I think in the police because emergency services. I mean, if you're in the job all the time, you're surrounded like a crew, and it's a team, and you kind of get a lot of your strength from the people around you as well.
mm.
Whereas I think the volunteers don't. Well, when they're together, they're good, but they're not together all that often. So, mate, maybe you can probably explain that
Oh,
side of
mate, definitely. And I've got to
it.
preface this by I haven't been to a critical incident as a volunteer firefighter. Well, I mean, the Nimborda fires were pretty full on, but they weren't. Um, I would not. I don't know. Some people might consider that a critical incident. To me, it was. Yeah, don't get me wrong. The fire was huge, but I never felt at any stage any human life was at risk, or there was certainly property at risk, and property was burnt. But I know that we very strongly, and sorry, the highway patrol that go to crashes around here, to their absolute credit, in the New England region, they are very, very strongly against. If they know there's a really critical thing and they need firefighters to put out a fire or something, and they know there's going to be like dead bodies or something like that, they will filter them before they get to the scene. So they will say, "You understand there are burning bodies in that car." Like, and I've never been to. I just know from what other guys have told me. I've never been to that sort of job here as a firefighter. I've been to plenty of bad crashes, but not here. So I know that there's a strong sense of protect the volunteers from that critical incident. But the thing is, the guys have been in for a really long time, have been exposed to stuff anyway. And it's funny how we talk about the protection of innocence. Like, I still protect it even in the RFS. It's like, guys, if you don't want to see this stuff, don't see it. Seriously, I'm telling you now. I've been to heaps of them
Yep,
without sounding like a dickhead. Like, if you don't want to see this stuff, don't subject yourself to it.
yep,
If you're comfortable, and mate, the other thing is we're in a rural area. Like, people deal with dead animals all the time, and a lot of people can just roll with the punches. Like, rural people are pretty resilient.
yeah,
So um, some of the volunteers will be no dramas. Oh, well, no, we just got to. These people have had a bad thing. We'll just deal with it. Like that, they're pretty good. They just get on with the job. That's bushies
yep.
for you. But anyway, I'm still protective of them. But the you're 100% correct in that you don't really have a crew. You don't
No,
work with these people all the time. You know them. You know them. You're from the same area, but they're cow cockies, mate. They're out. A lot of these people work by themselves. They are by themselves a lot. They might be moving cattle from one paddock to another. They might work together in the yards when they're, dealing with when they're working cattle through the yards or loading them onto a truck or something like that. But generally speaking, they're not working with someone all the time. They might be fencing by themselves or doing something. So you're completely correct. They don't have that team support. And I think they also don't get exposed to anywhere near the amount. Well, they definitely don't get exposed to anywhere near the amount that the full time emergency service get exposed to. So,
Yeah.
There's two sort of components to that, but yeah, mate, it's I'm a firm believer in there's a lot of volunteers that I would, yeah, right, we got a fire. Yeah, a fire's a fire. Like everyone knows what fire looks like.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to go and put the fire out. Well, that's an impersonal thing. It's no problem. But when it's devastating fire and human life is at risk, and I don't know, that's where I sort of, I don't know, my spidey senses go, guys, we need to get out. And there's an extremely strong push for safety. We get out early. We don't really put people at risk.
Yep.
But you know, I hope I don't ever want to detract from the remote, and not just remote, mate. Any volunteers. A lot of volunteers are quite resilient anyway. I mean, the fact that they're volunteering to do this stuff is one thing,
Yep.
um, but especially in rural areas, mate, rural people are just resilient people. They just know how to tough it out.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah. No, that's very true. Yeah, mate. Yeah, yeah. You're dead right there. It's yeah. I mean, and yeah, hats off to all those first responders. But something you mentioned there is the fact that we risk assess differently than people that don't do it all the time. And this is
Oh
taking
shit, yeah,
nothing away from them, like, because we do it, we've done it constantly in our career. And one thing I find now, I risk assess constantly in just day to day life, driving
yeah,
a car. You're walking down the road, you see something, and I think this is probably why a lot of workplace health and safety loves ex cops, as particularly, but probably first responders, because you have to look out for risk constantly.
mm.
And I'll tell you a story. Like the other day, we came past, just driving along with Miriam in the car, and went past a road rage incident where this guy was going off, and these two poor younger guys in the car, and this guy was being a dick, and rah rah. And I was actually, anybody that knows me knows I drive a tank. It should actually have tracks, not tires, but.
Yeah,
So I was, and like it's literally got steel all the way around it. So I was positioning myself, just to try and
it's an Isuzu MUX, folks.
it
It's not an actual tank. He's
no,
not that crazy. Oh
but it's got a lot of bull bar on it.
yeah, it does.
And anyway, so I was just trying to put myself in a position so he couldn't, try and ram or anything like that. Anyway, we stopped at a set of traffic lights, and the guy got out and was walking up the car, and I was, "Woi!" And he half looked at me, but didn't want to do anything to do with me. Poor old Miriam, she's shitting herself because she doesn't like confrontation anyway, and rightly so. But in that instant, I've checked him up and down for weapons. I've looked at the way he stands. I've done a risk assessment of the traffic around, and it's all automatic. You don't think about it, you just do it. Um,
Oh yeah.
and luckily the guys put up their windows, and he smashed on it a couple of times but didn't break anything, and then just got back in the car, and then I positioned myself between them again. He lost interest after that. But it's just one of those things, like the risk assess all the time, and yeah, I mean, I did it without even thinking about it, and I've been out for what, 7 years now.
Mate, yeah, I hear you. That's almost a whole different thing. The whole risk, how you up and down people all the time. You're just constantly scanning people. Look, I know that everyone's nodding. All especially coppers and military are nodding,
Yeah.
and people can understand what we're on about there. So yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, mate,
Oh, excuse me.
mate, I'm just gonna, because we're up to about 23 minutes, and there's something. My dad rang me up after listening to our last episode, and so a big shout out to my dad. And
John Schultz.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's right, Johnny Schultz. So he actually loves, and he asked if we can do a story in each podcast, because he really really loves the stories, and he reckons you put one of those in there. Yeah, he loved it. I think he loved the one, where I thought I was Mel Gibson, and
Oh
loved
yeah.
the one, yeah, where you just about got into a riot in the middle of middle of Darwin.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So,
good.
but, and mate, we have. I mean, we've got a couple of stories, and I don't know. Can you think of any off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'll tell the story. Yep.
Okay,
I've got one.
go.
It just came to me, and I'll have to think as I talk. Um, Me and me good mate. Once again, I got to give him a big shout out. He's a bloody good mate of mine. He actually looks a bit like you, but he's about 20 years older than you. No, he's not. He's about 15 years older than you.
Oh,
Anyway, Danny
so he's good
Beerman.
looking
I've
then.
mentioned him before. Oh, he's a good looking rooster, mate. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So Danny Beerman. He once I'll just talk about Danny. I better give him a shout out and tell him I've spoken to him. He's not a big podcaster, so I don't think he's listened to any, but I'll tell him about this one so he can listen.
yeah.
Danny Beerman's a bloke. He was junior to me in the police force, but he's about 20 years older than me. And he was just a fella who invoked calm everywhere he went. It didn't matter what was happening, he was calm. So anyway, Alice Springs, as we know, and as we've spoken about, and don't forget us, just bloody Google Alice Springs and read some stories, and you'll soon find out what we're on about.
Yeah.
But this is a bit different because this is common to everywhere in Australia. We were closing all the licensed premises. So it's a very common thing for all the cops in town when the licensed premises close, you just hang about and you just have your presence and you just engage with people and you just have a yarn. And your best bet there is to just be friendly, but also your old saying, mate, you draw a line in the sand. And when the
Yeah.
line's crossed, you act immediately. So what happens there is that people see a nice, happy, friendly copper, and then bang, someone gets arrested. And then there's nice, happy, friendly coppers, and then bang, someone gets arrested.
Yeah.
And that was Danny Beerman to an absolute T. And he was really, really new in the Northern Territory, but he was not new to policing. So Danny had served in the Queensland Police, the Australian Federal Police, the Melbourne Fire Brigade, and was now in the Northern Territory Police Force, as well as having spent a lot of time in the mining industry. He's a Kiwi originally. Sorry, he was in the New Zealand Police originally,
Yeah, all
and then
right.
he,
Yeah.
then he was a miner. Yeah, so and he's done a lot of things, but he's in his 60s, so he's been around a day or two. Anyway, we get out one night, and there's two units pulled up out the front of that little strip that I'd mentioned in another. But when I talked about Alice Springs, the little entertainment strip just in town where you've got about 3 or 4 pubs lined up next to each other, just near the mall. And anyway, there's a big crowd that pours out of those pubs. Anyway, we're walking through the crowd, and look, most of the crowd, as they always are, were fine. They're getting in taxis, they're getting Ubers, they're walking home, they're doing whatever they need to do. But there's always those nigglers who just can't help but cause a few dramas. So anyway, there was a few little dramas just happening, and a few arguments, and a pushy and shovey, and a fight's about to happen. Anyway, I'm going, oh, hang on, Dan. We'll just say, no, I'll show you this because he'd worked at the Gold Coast. He'd worked Cavill Avenue and he'd worked Schoolies Week and he knew how to deal with these big crowds of drunks. And you know what? I would even say better than the Northern Territory Police. The Northern Territory Police are very good at going to a lot of big problems, but
Yeah.
unless you're in Mitchell Street in Darwin or working, Alice Springs does get it a bit, but nowhere else really. Everywhere gets problems outside pubs, but you don't get entertainment precincts that are full of pubs and full of people. So there's only really one major place in the territory where that happens, and that's Mitchell Street.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I got good at that later, but not by this stage. And anyway, there's a bit of an argument. Danny's walked up and gone, you go that way, you go that way. If anyone turns around, you're getting arrested. One bloke turned around, the other bloke goes, what are you going to F and dropped him to the ground, handcuffed behind the back. That was the end of that. Bang, gone. And we walked him away, and it set the precedent. And we locked him up, and we came back, and we're friendly. G'day, folks. Hey, who needs a taxi, guys? There's some more further up. Come on, guys. We'll get you out of here. You don't need to hang around. There's nothing to do. There's no toilets. There's no pubs. Time to go home. And you're being friendly. You're not. We were pretty
Yeah.
friendly. We never yelled and screamed. We just told people it was time to go. Anyway, another little argument kicks off. A couple of blokes just gobbing off, and one bloke walks over, and Danny walks over and goes, mate, turn and get in that taxi and go. And he goes, no, you can get, but bang, arrested. Bang, you're out of here too. And it was like, holy shit, Dan's on fire. And this was new to us because we would deal with people when they'd kicked off, but Dan was super proactive. He nipped it in the bud before it even got a chance to flare. Anyway, he didn't say much. He just did it, and he sort of took charge. And I was his senior partner, but I mean, I'm not his senior partner. But I mean,
Yeah.
I was technically, but I'm not because he's got heaps of experience. So he just owned it. He was in his element. You see him walking confidently through the crowd. G'day, folks, and firm but fair, and very much the authority figure, but very much friendly and there to
Yeah.
help. And anything you need, he's going to help you with. But you need to move, and it's time to go. And the second someone was belligerent or disorderly or refusing to leave the area, bang,
Yeah.
arrested,
Yep.
arrested, arrested. He was so good. Like, and I must just emphasize that we're not talking arrested immediately for arguing with a policeman. No,
No.
it was more than that. Like, I've sort of skimmed over it a bit, but there was more to it. These were legitimate arrests. There was no issue. They went to court and got found guilty. There was
Yep.
no issue. I think it was just slightly before we got those infringement notices where we could give them to people. But
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
it was no, he was absolutely sensational. Anyway, this one night, Dan and I, sorry, there was a preface to to Danny Bean. There's one night, and there was a blue outside the pub. It was outside the casino in Alice Springs, and anyway, it was a pretty big fight, and there was a couple of different mobs that don't really get along, mixing it up. A few terps is involved, and it was on. And anyway, it was a renter mob with the local people, the local Aboriginal people in Alice Springs are a renter. And anyway, there was a few there. I think they're from South Australia, so they'd be from the APY lands. And anyway, it was going to kick off. And Danny started telling people on the outside of and we'd all work communities, but this is in the middle of town, and these were not really community people. They were sort of just, they were town folk sort of thing. And he's moving through the crowd and he's pushing them all back, pushing them back, pushing them back. And all of a sudden, by him just moving to the central core, he'd moved all the crowd back that wanted to be seen there but weren't there, went straight into the middle. And the one big instigator, he's just grabbed him and walked out. And I'm like, and he didn't really resist. He sort of got taken a bit by surprise. And then he's gone, "You'll come with me, boy." And that was the end of that. And anyway, a few more kicked off. So I walked in and grabbed one, and we had a few units there. So a few other people grabbed people. And we had probably a 30 people brewing all in brawl. We arrested maybe 4 people immediately, and it completely solved the problem.
Yep.
And that was all the influence of Danny Beerman through his experience in New Zealand. And you got to remember, New Zealand police deal with the same stuff as far as like, Indigenous groups over there. They've got pride to show, and they're quite, you throw a heap of alcohol in, there's a lot of aggression there.
Yep.
He just and his experience in the Queensland Police working in the Gold Coast, like obviously the massive entertainment precincts in the Gold Coast. He just went straight in, and we just did the same thing. And as a result, we turned what would have been a big blue, like it was brewing, it was about to burst.
Yep.
And we just went whack, 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 4 arrests, and everyone was, I'm not getting arrested, and they just left. So
Yep.
by that decisive, not aggressive, there was very
Yep.
minimal force. Like I think we handcuffed a couple, but the rest sort of came with us.
Yep.
But that's by saying, "You leave now, mate. You get the back in the cage. Your behaviour determines what occurs here, but you'll come with me right now. You don't have a choice."
Yep.
And a few people carry on like, "Oh no, don't look. Just go away. Just we'll talk to you in the cage. We'll talk to you in the cage."
Yep.
And I think we actually released most of them. I think one of them kicked on a bit, and he got it. I can't remember, mate. If we had the infringements, then I can't remember. Anyway, if not, we arrested one. So I think one went back to the watch house, but we detained 4 and then
Yeah.
spoke to them and decided to release them once the crowd had moved on. And yeah, mate, that was all down to him. So that was a
Yeah.
little story about me mate Danny Beerman and just
Well, it
decisiveness.
yeah, mate, you've just reminded me. So one of my first, and I've mentioned him before, Alex Siebert was my first senior partner when I left the police. And one of the most important things he taught me straight off, he said they get one chance, Schultzy.
Oh yeah,
And that's it. You give them one chance, and he said, and then you make the decision for them. So, and and that for any cops that are coming in, it is so important to make decisive decisions. You've got to back yourself in your decisions. I mean, you've got to justify yourself, of course, and do it within the law and all that sort of thing. But make sure that you make a decision, you stick to it, because it doesn't matter. I mean, even in normal life, if you to and fro and people won't follow you.
no,
So, and you need the public in those instances to follow you. So you've got to make a decision, like that line drawn in the sand. As soon as it crossed, don't never second guess yourself. Just go through and do it. And that's probably some of the best advice I can give. So a big shout out to Alex Siebert. And mate, we also need to mention Chris Killen.
oh yeah, killer,
Yeah,
killer sent a message through,
he did, mate. Yes. So a big shout out to him. He's retiring in a few weeks, I believe. I
mate.
think
I'll
he
just
said.
so I I've met Killer. I don't know him very well, and I don't think he knows me. But
Yep.
obviously he had a bloody good reputation. But from memory, and I look, hey Killer, if you're listening, can you get onto us and let us know if I'm wrong? Because I'm pretty sure he was a tactical operator back in the day, and he spent a lot of time in water police after that.
He did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it would have been old fisheries, marine and fisheries back in the day, which was just a team of legends when we joined. Like marine and fisheries were the old guard, they were so good.
Oh, yeah, Cubis. He
Cube, oh
was
mate. Well,
he
David,
was
we should give a shout out to Dave Cubis too. He
we
was our
should.
firearms
Yep.
instructor at and I'm pretty sure he follows the podcast. He's
He
mentioned it
does.
a few times, and he mate, he was a very big influence early on at the
Definitely.
college, but he was part of marine and fisheries, but which became water police, which I'm pretty sure has now been dissolved because the NT government has got a fisheries department, which is a different organisation. But
Ah,
what was
interesting.
water police has now become search and rescue squad.
All right. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and listen, any NT coppers, just tell us if I'm wrong. I don't have I'm only going off what I've sort of spoken to people up in the territory about, and only very briefly. So,
Yep.
from what I'm hearing is that the fisheries enforcement component of water police has been taken on by a separate government department, which it would bring it
Oh,
in line with the rest of the country, really.
yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
density
Killer.
region.
So Killer would have to have been in the job 40 years.
Oh, mate, a long time.
Yeah.
I met him. He took over. So I got sent out 2013. I think I got sent out to look after Warrawee, Goulburn Island, out there, and he took over from me. So I did the handover. That's when I first met him. But a hell of a nice guy and really, really good cop. So big shout out, mate, and well deserved, mate. Enjoy your retirement and
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely well deserved. And yeah, seriously, he's a bloke I'd love to have on actually.
well, mate, I did actually ask him, and he said, "Oh, look, likes to stick to the background." So, but
Politely
he
declined.
but he oh yeah, it would be great. But he was the one that also suggested that we get Bob Rennie back on and give Bob Rennie a few beers.
Yeah, I think he was liquor him right up and get some really good stories. Yeah,
So yeah, so if you're listening, Bob, you might get a call soon.
yeah, no, for sure. Oh, mate, I'll just do a bit of a recap. So we sort of spoke about, how I think the question was, how do you find dealing, especially in the job and just after the job, how do you deal with just your friends and family and like people who were not in emergency services?
Yep,
And we've sort of spoken about that, how you get protective of the young, like you protect innocence, and how you sort of struggle to relate to peers who haven't been involved in that sort of thing. And I
yep,
think I think the third part that I was trying to talk about was how you need to engage with those who were there. So that's why like retired police
yes,
associations and things like that exist, because you need to engage with those people who understand what you're talking about.
yep,
Um,
yep,
I think that was the first component, and then I think we told a few yarns. So yeah, it's to answer the question. Yeah, you're going to struggle. I think what you need to do is find mutual ground with people who weren't in the job. And the other thing is the immediacy of that fades. Like I get along fine with everyone now. Like I don't find it an issue, but it's always still there. And like you mentioned, Schultzy,
yep.
your spidey senses tingled with a road rage incident where you've I don't know. If I had my family in the car, there's no way I would ever engage. I would disengage, and I would never put my family at risk. But if I was by myself and I could see, especially if I could see innocent people being targeted, I think I would get involved. But I would also be risk assessing the whole time. Like
Oh
you
yeah,
can't not do that. So, but the thing is, a lot of people who've never been involved in this sort of thing wouldn't do that. They wouldn't, and fair enough. Like they've got no experience, no knowledge, they have no idea, mate. And that's not detracting from them. And I think we mentioned that. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's that finding that common ground, and for your own sort of mental health, make sure you make good friends in the job, and not just police, like emergency services in general, and the military. And that's why a lot of organisations exist for veterans and a lot of people still in the military aren't as badly affected if they've been deployed. If they're still in the army, they've probably got higher rank now, and they're But the guys who got out after their deployments, I think they're the ones who really struggled, and
Yeah,
their solution was getting in touch and staying in touch with the mates who
yep.
went overseas with you. And the blokes who understand, and guys and girls. When I say blokes, I'm not being gender. I don't care. Whoever went overseas with you, they're the ones you stay in touch with them, and just you don't have to talk all the time. But I guarantee you, you might talk for 6 months, and you'll talk to them, and it's like you spoke to them 2 minutes ago. Like it's
Oh, exactly,
yeah,
mate. It's just some of those the connections are never lost.
no,
You're friends forever.
oh yeah,
Um,
no, definitely.
that's for sure. But anyway, mate, we're up to 40 minutes already.
Yeah, we got there, eh? Bloody hell. Yeah, we had another subject we were going to cover, but we'll talk about that another time. I think.
Well, mate, as always, that's
Yeah.
the thing. You always sit there and just have a couple backup just in case we can't keep on talking, but we managed to. So
Mm.
hopefully it was entertaining for everybody. And mate, and like I said to everybody listening out there, if you do have experiences like where you do find it difficult to relate to others, send it through. You can get in
Yeah.
contact with us, contact us at twoordinarycops.com, or send it through the socials, and like if you've got some experiences or maybe some insights that we haven't covered. Yeah,
Oh,
I'll let
mate,
us know.
absolutely. We are not experts. Once
No,
again, we're just, mate, we are not. We are two ordinary cops. That's why we called it that.
yep,
So
yeah, there's
we,
nothing
yeah.
special about us.
If someone knows something, if someone knows a technical term for what we're talking about, we're literally just telling our stories. That's all it is.
Yep, yep, and our
So
experiences and how we found it. So, and but please let us know. We do love the feedback, and even if we're wrong, or if you got some better insights, yeah, by more means, this is also to help other people listening to it as well. So,
yeah, definitely. Yep.
anyway, mate.
Good on
uh,
you, Schultzy.
All right, mate. We'll see you all next time. Until then, it's bye from us.
All the best. See you later.